So a woman went out there. She's a journalist with Business Insider, decided she was going to try and buy a gun from Walmart. And she posted about it. Well, obviously, when you are going to go through the process of actually trying to buy a firearm, all of the myths about how easy it is to buy a firearm kind of evaporate. Like that little dork David Hogg, he runs around and he tells everybody that it's easier to get an AR-15 than it is to get cold medicine in the United States, which of course is absurd, and anybody with a brain would know that it's absurd. But he still says it. And there are brain dead idiots out there who are oxygen thieves who fall for it every time. When I arrived, I looked for the sporting goods department. I found it about 100 steps from the closest entrance to the store. And on my way to the department, I walked past shelves of school supplies, the toy department, and the bike shop. I spotted the gun display directly under the sign for the department. A selection of about 20 rifles and shotguns was displayed in a locked glass case behind the sporting goods counter. The guns ranged in price from $159 to $474. The counter in front of the guns displayed pocket knives, binoculars, digital night vision, etc. So she talks about how Walmart stopped selling the handguns and everything else. I told the employee behind the counter that I wanted to buy a gun, and they called for a manager. So she goes through this whole process, and what we end up finding out is that obviously it's not that easy. She apologized, told me the rules were strict around background checks, and asked me to come back another time to finish the purchase. She's trying to get around the background check, obviously. And you can't, because you can't just walk into a store and buy a gun and walk out of it. Okay, that's not how it works. You've got to go through the whole process. After a few minutes, a Walmart manager arrived at the gun sales counter. She said that I could not buy a gun that day because no authorized firearms sellers were scheduled to work. Weird how that works, right? They still have to have an FFL, ladies and gentlemen. And most people have no idea what an FFL is if they are anti-gun. Before I left the store, the manager offered to remove a rifle from the case for me to inspect. Okay. So again, when she unlocked the case, I noticed that the rifles were strung together with a metal cord. Each rifle was secured to the cord with plastic zip ties. The manager cut a zip tie to remove the rifle and immediately placed it with a new zip tie as she returned it to the case. After inspecting the rifle, I left the store, told her I would return 2 days later. That's when the FFL license holder, I should say, was coming back. Let's see. On Thursday, I drove another 30 minutes to Chesterfield, confident that I would successfully purchase a firearm that day. So she's now come back, and the FFL person is supposed to be on duty. Went to the sporting goods department around noon. There was nobody attending the counter by the firearms. After waiting about 10 minutes, I walked to another aisle, found somebody to help me, told her that I wanted to buy a gun. She said that she was an authorized seller and that she could help me. We walked back to the gun display where she picked up a phone and called somebody. Can you meet at the front to help me with a gun sale? That's what she said to the phone. Okay. So she turned to me. She said that she needed help to ensure that the sales process was completed correctly. She charged me $2 for a federal background check, then left the counter and returned a few minutes later with a form titled Department of State Police Virginia Firearms Transaction Record. She told me to complete the form. The form asked several obvious questions: name, address, social security, etc. It did ask about race, gender, citizenship status, and all of that things. Again, if you're not a U.S. citizen, it's illegal for you to own a firearm unless you're legally residing in the country, and then there are exceptions to that. Under the section called Certification of Transferee, it asked about my criminal record, whether I had ever been convicted of a felony, subject to a restraining order, or prohibited from purchasing a firearm, along with other specifics. In red print, the form said that an untruthful answer may subject you to criminal prosecution. If only they actually applied that standard. So how many times have we caught people who buy these things lying on this thing? And of course, the NICS system is not linked up with everybody, which is a huge major hole in this system. The seller told me that my background check would likely be completed within a few minutes after I finished the paperwork. Once the purchase was finalized, an employee would walk the gun out to my car with me. But I had only just finished printing my name when she stopped me and asked whether the address on my license matched my home address. I had moved since I obtained my license, and the addresses didn't match. That was a problem, she said. To pass the background check, I would need to bring in a government-issued document with my correct address, such as a bill from a state-owned utility or a car registration. I have never bought a gun, so I wasn't aware of this. Now, keep in mind, this is a journalist, okay? And I am giving her all the credit in the world for doing this, all right? Because she's explaining the process here that a lot of Americans who have never gone through the process literally have no idea how to do. Steven Crowder did this with a couple of people with his Change My Mind segment. He took a couple of college girls to go buy a gun. They were convinced that it was super easy, and he walked them through the whole process. And they were shocked to discover that there's actually a lot of barriers to buying a gun if you're not legally allowed to own one. It's not the easiest thing in the world to do. But people have been given this impression falsely that it is. And they've been given this impression by politicians, by activists, and really people who don't know what the process is actually like. And so this is a journalist who I'm sure has seen all of these stories before, and she was under the impression, she even writes about this, she was under the impression that this was going to be a slam dunk, easy thing to do. And it turns out that it's not. Now, if you have all of your ducks in a row and you're not a criminal, you don't have a criminal background, that sort of thing, then yeah, I mean, you can get everything done, but you still have to pass the background checks and fill out all the paperwork and get it all done correctly. But she was still under the impression that she would just be able to walk in and do this. Now, another question that should probably be asked in Virginia, where she is, what is the legal requirement to change your address on your driver's license? Because maybe she's violating that state rule, which is not a crime, by the way. It's just a minor little civil penalty. But she did say that she moved. She didn't say she just moved. She did say that she moved, though. She hasn't updated her address yet. So anyway, the Walmart employee apologized, told me the rules are strict around background checks, and asked me to come back another time to finish the purchase. I left the store empty-handed again. At this point, I decided to give up on buying a gun at Walmart. Probably easier to go to Chicago and buy one on the streets. Perfectly honest with you. I had invested several hours across 2 days on this. If I were actually in the market for a rifle, I would have gone to a local gun shop instead after about 5 minutes of trying to figure out which Walmart stores sold guns. Where do you think people go for these things? It's like, Dick's Sporting Goods, I guess they're doing this test now on whether or not they can get rid of all gun sales. And they've suffered economically because of this. And here's the thing. Their firearms side was never a big money earner for them. It's just that people stay away from them now because they don't want to do business with the company. So Dick's Sporting Goods, what they're trying to do now is just say, we might get rid of gun sales altogether, and then we just won't sell guns, and then maybe people will come back and start buying overly priced balls from us. But that's, again, people are irritated, not that they were ever going to get their guns from Dick's Sporting Goods, because most of you have, again, roundly pointed out that they were too expensive, they didn't have a good selection, you didn't go to Dick's for firearms, you went elsewhere for firearms, like Second Amendment Arms and Range, where you can get a listener-exclusive discount on any firearm purchase that nobody else is going to be able to match. So people are doing that instead. You get better guns at a lower price because you know certain people like me, and you're able to purchase what you actually want. When you go to Walmart, I mean, that's kind of where you go to get like an entry-level sort of a firearm for a kid. You're taking them on their first hunting trip or something, and maybe you go to Walmart and get that, but even then, it's only because it's in the neighborhood, and maybe you don't have a gun store around or something of that nature. I don't know, but this is not exactly the easiest thing in the world to do. But I give her credit; she actually went out there and she tried to purchase one from Walmart, as everybody was basically saying it was as easy as going and picking up your milk at a supercenter, which of course it is not.